All right, let's dive into a case that seriously sounds like it was ripped straight from a political thriller, but I assure you it is very real. We're talking about a high-stakes legal showdown that pits a sitting foreign leader against the full power of a U.S. federal court. So this is the central puzzle, right? How on earth can Venezuela's leader, Nicolás Maduro, possibly be put on trial in a Manhattan courtroom? I mean, just think about that for a second. The answer really pulls back the curtain on a fascinating and, let's be honest, super controversial aspect of American legal power. Okay, so first things first. Why a U.S. court to begin with? What's the connection? To figure that out, we have to go back to the federal indictment that kicked this whole thing off. So it all kicks off right here. Back in 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice files this indictment. And you have to understand, the charges aren't for anything political. Nope. They're for specific violations of U.S. federal law. We're talking narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation. These are crimes that are literally on the books right here in the United States. Okay, now this phrase right here, direct effects. You really need to zero in on that because this is the absolute foundation for the entire U.S. case. The argument from prosecutors is that these alleged drug shipments had a direct and very harmful impact inside the United States. And that, they say, is what gives American courts the jurisdiction to even hear the case. And the place where they filed this case? It's a very specific and, let me tell you, very powerful court. Manhattan's Southern District of New York, often just called the SDNY. Now, this was no accident. The SDNY is legendary for handling these massive, super complex international cases. Things involving terrorism, global finance. It's basically the go-to arena for these kinds of high-stakes legal showdowns. Okay, so we've covered the why the U.S. is involved. But the really big question is, how? I mean, how can U.S. law just reach across borders and apply to things someone did in a totally different country? Well, that brings us to this whole concept of U.S. jurisdiction. The key concept you need to know is called extraterritorial jurisdiction. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like a legal long arm. Congress has written certain laws, like these narco-terrorism statutes, specifically to apply outside U.S. borders, but only if the crime was intended to have an effect inside the U.S. It's the law reaching out, literally. All right, now this is where things get, well, really controversial. There's this thing called the Kerr-Frisbee Doctrine. It's a long-standing principle in U.S. law that pretty much says we don't care how you got here. I'm serious. Even if someone was, say, forcibly grabbed abroad and brought to the U.S., the court's power to put them on trial isn't affected. It completely separates the legality of the trial itself from the method of capture. Wild, right? So if you put it all together, you can see this clear three-step path to an American courtroom. First, you've got the indictment. That's where the formal charges are filed under U.S. law. Step 2, and this is the big one, the defendant has to be physically brought into U.S. custody. And then, once they are on U.S. soil, Step 3, the trial can begin in the exact court that issued that original indictment. Okay, so let's say the trial starts. A big question you might have is, whose rulebook are they using? Which country's laws apply here? And the answer is simple. It is all American. 100%. From the moment it begins to the moment it ends, the whole case is governed by U.S. federal law. We're talking the specific charges, the rules about what evidence is allowed, how the trial is run, and of course, the whole thing is overseen by U.S. judge. It's all happening inside the American legal system. And that brings us to what is really the heart of the entire legal battle here, the giant controversy over immunity. See, there's a really powerful argument that this trial shouldn't even be happening at all. This is where you see international law and this U.S. indictment clash head-on. This slide just lays it all out, the two sides of the coin. Maduro's defense is actually pretty straightforward. Under international law, sitting heads of state are typically immune from being prosecuted in foreign courts. Simple enough, right? But the U.S. has this major counterargument, and it's based entirely on politics. The U.S. government, since 2019, has not officially recognized Maduro as the legitimate president of Venezuela. So from their point of view, if you're not the recognized head of state, you don't get head of state immunity. The entire legal case could actually turn on that one single political decision. So what makes this case so different, so exceptional? Well, it's because it's one of those incredibly rare moments where the world of law and the world of international politics are in a direct, unavoidable collision. I mean, this is just a highly, highly unusual situation. First, you have a foreign leader who is, for all intents and purposes, running his country, being brought to the U.S. for trial. That alone raises these huge fundamental questions about national sovereignty. The case is this weird hybrid, right? It's using regular domestic U.S. criminal law to go after actions that you'd normally see handled through diplomacy or international relations. It really forces a debate. What are the real limits of one nation's legal power? And that really leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful question. Look, the Maduro case isn't just about one guy. It's become a major test case for the reach of any nation's law in our totally globalized world. When a country's own legal system smashes right into international norms and raw politics, whose rules are supposed to win? And honestly, there is no easy answer to that.